was such a huge mistake for the incoming Labour government to cancel the Rwanda deterrence scheme before it had even started.
Now, don't expect me to start by signalling any sort of uncanny resemblance between Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp and former Tory Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, because I don't think that's either a serious or meaningful point, and as you know, this channel is all about seriousness and meaningfulness. And as for you, Mr Philp, don't use the very first question that you're asked by veteran TV presenter Trevor Phillips as an opportunity to talk up your own decimated and thoroughly disastrous political party.
Chris Philp, Louis Haigh told me this morning pretty clearly that the government is contemplating paying countries like Vietnam and Kurdistan in a deal to keep migrants away from Britain. Would you support such a deal?
Yes, we'd support any plan which cuts or stops the illegal crossings over the English Channel. In fact, what they're proposing appears to build on work the previous Conservative government had already been doing, so we would support that.
Well, what do you know? Any chance, young Mr Smug and Smarmy, Mr Philp, that you're about to extend your tribute to your party and declare that the Rwanda scheme, brainchild of brainless Priti Patel no less, is the one true solution to illegal migrant crossings to the UK?
However, on its own, it clearly won't be enough. What we need is a deterrent, and that is why it was such a huge mistake for the incoming Labour government to cancel the Rwanda deterrence scheme before it had even started. It was due to start on the 24th of July. They cancelled it. And in the absence of that deterrent, of course, people are going to keep crossing. And that is why numbers crossing the English Channel have gone up significantly since Labour came to office.
Oh, fancy that. Do subscribe, do give the video a like, and do drop me a comment. And if you're feeling super generous, please donate. Hit the thanks button below. So anyway, the previous government was all set to break the law itself on the 24th of July 2024 in the remote event that they had actually won the election by launching the famous Rwanda plan, were they? Or aren't you aware, Mr Philp, that in November 2023, the UK Supreme Court upheld the Court of Appeal's ruling that your Rwanda plan was unlawful since Rwanda was deemed not to be a safe country? And before you start tearing pieces out of Article 3 of the ECHR, Mr Philp, you could have had your Rwanda plan if there was suddenly no danger of human rights breaches in that country. Article 3 of the ECHR doesn't block an immigration control policy where one country pays another to round up and hold its asylum seekers as long as that other country doesn't pose a risk to a person's life or freedom. And hey, I hope your party didn't invest all of £500 million into your Rwanda scheme without first ensuring that it was a safe country.
But you bunged away something north of 500 million on the Rwanda scheme. Now you're going to support something which some people might say is just throwing good money after bad.
Bunged away. You've got to love it when a posho tries to talk slang. Oh, and Mr Philp, having bunged away £500 million on your failed Rwanda project, how can you even have an opinion on the government's own potential plans for curbing immigration, no matter how much longer they plan to bung away on those plans?
Well, look, we need to stop these crossings, and we'll constructively support the government where they have initiatives. But the initiatives they're announcing are not going to be enough. They are not on their own going to work, because I think, as the National Crime Agency themselves have said, as even Martin Hewitt, their new border czar, has said, you need a deterrent as well, and that means removing people who have arrived here illegally.
Oh, I just bet you've got some smarty pants answer already for the question that your response begs, namely...
But if Rwanda was a deterrent, why isn't a deal with Kurdistan or Turkey going to be equally a deterrent?
Well, they're completely different things. So just to be clear, they are not proposing, as far as I can see, to return people, have a returns agreement with those countries. They're proposing to work with those countries to prevent departures in the first place. Okay. Now, that's all well and good. I'm, perfectly happy to support that, but it's not going to work as a deterrent. To deter people, they need to know that if they illegally and dangerously cross the English Channel, they are going to be immediately removed somewhere else. And that's what Rwanda did. And these deals don't do that.
All right, fair point. Except that your own proposed scheme of mass deportations, which is what you've just advocated, not in any inexplicably confident and self-righteous way or anything, was, I repeat, declared unlawful by a UK court of law. Twice. If on the off chance you're now in for a bit of a dig from your very host, don't blame me.
You're talking about the deterrent, but actually, whereas Rwanda basically only got 4 people, I think, most of them members of government, to go to Rwanda.
If you're feeling red-faced at this point, Mr Philp, please don't look at me. Now, in case young Mr Phillips is about to cite an example of a strategy for reducing illegal migrant crossings of the kind that the government is contemplating that has cut illegal boat crossings by 62% no less, do us all a favour, Mr Philp, and don't fight back by citing the apparent strengths of your non-starter, non-lawful and non-existent blimmin' Rwanda scheme.
The Italian scheme has cut the boat crossings into Italy by, I think, 62%. This sounds like a better bet, don't you think?
Oh, first of all, the Rwanda scheme never actually started. It was due to start on the 24th of July.
And you spent 700 million on it.
And it would have saved us a lot of money had it been started, because the deterrent would have stopped people crossing the English Channel. We know that because it worked in Australia.
And as we all know, whatever works for Australia works for the UK. Unquestionable. And while I'm not saying that the claim that you've just made isn't true, I'm saying that it is quite a convenient claim, really. I'm also wondering why you didn't demonstrate the content of that claim to the UK public when you had the chance. Mind you, not much point in doing that if the scheme was only going to be judged illegal twice. Then again, wasn't your party just going to ignore the law and run the scheme anyway? Oh look, let's just move on before I mention that we've just learned that the amount of public money that you wasted on your famous Rwanda plan wasn't 500 million quid, but 700 million quid.
Now, you mentioned the Libya deal. Now, that's a little bit different, because what Italy did with Libya was stop people departing from the coast of Libya in the direction of the small islands. I think Lampedusa is one, and the Italian mainland. That is not what Labour is currently proposing. They're not proposing to stop people embarking from France. They're trying to stop people leaving Vietnam or Kurdistan in the first place. Now, that's all well and good, but it won't stop the boats, whereas our Rwanda scheme would have done, and that's why the Labour Party were wrong to cancel it before it even started.
But just to be clear, you will support it, even if
look,
it's not.
I mean, look, it's a constructive step, but it's not going to fix the problem on its own.
Well, you've talked a good game on the matter of how to stop illegal migrant crossings, Mr Philp. If good game means repeatedly stating how successful your non-existent scheme of mass deportations is. Anyway, how about we move on to the matter of the changes to agricultural property relief due to take effect in April 2026. You should enjoy this, Mr. I'm so smug you'd think that my party wasn't on its lowest number of MPs ever, as you can really crush the government with put-downs now, as if that's not something that the whole flipping world could do. And yes, government, that's basically a put-down from me to you. Yeah.
Let's talk about the farmers. We know that you back the farmers on inheritance tax, but are you happy about their tactics, threatening to empty the shelves of supermarkets, for example?
Well, first of all, I think what the Labour government has done to farmers is absolutely shocking. It means that, according to DEFRA's figures, something like 3/4 of farmers are not going to be able to leave their farms to their children or their grandchildren. And these are farmers that, they're not well off particularly. They're often actually struggling to make ends meet because farming is not very profitable these days. And of course, we rely on farmers for our food security. So the fact that Labour has declared war on farmers is obviously bad for farmers.
Yes, farmers everywhere in the UK are currently stockpiling their nukes and their AK-47s, while government ministers themselves are, as we speak, performing target practice and getting their camouflage gear on, ready to be dispatched any moment now to East Anglia, Devon and Cumbria in these initial stages of military combat between the government and the farmers of this land. By and large, the country appears to be siding with the farmers in this war and are speaking of cloning themselves into carbon copies of notably self-righteous and melodramatic shadow Home Secretaries if the government doesn't immediately surrender to the farmers.
But it's actually bad for all of us because it'll undermine our food security and Trevor, it'll increase our food prices.
We understand the case, and in fact I'm going to be talking to the boss of the NFU later on, but what about their tactics? Is the Conservative Party comfortable with farmers essentially doing what French farmers have been doing for years, which is threatening to block up roads, threatening to make people uncomfortable and hungry and so on?
Well, I think people have a right to protest, and obviously we respect the right to protest within the law. So, and it's up to Parliament to set where the law sits. So I think providing they're behaving lawfully, legally, then they do have a right to protest. And I understand why they feel so strongly, because their livelihoods are threatened. But moreover, it's likely that food prices for the rest of us are going to go up as a result of Labour's assault on farmers.
You mean the government's military assault on farmers, Mr Philp? Don't start watering down your own melodramatic and chumped up metaphors now. But I do understand your disgust with the idea of raising taxes for farmers. Your own party would never raise taxes for people who provide a crucial product or service to the country, would it? No wonder you didn't scrap buy-to-let mortgage interest tax relief, a tax relief for people who provide homes in 2020 or anything. No, wait. Time for a change of subject, I'd say. Don't you agree, Mr Filthy?
Let's talk about another issue which has exercised your leader. She's called for a review of hate crime laws. Now, you were Minister for Crime for the last 2 years of the Conservative government. Didn't you notice that people's collars were being felt by the police for what they called hate speech? And why didn't you do something about it then?
Well, I did. It did concern me, and I did do something, because the police should not be acting as the thought police, particularly in relation to journalists, but actually more widely as well. Free speech is very important. We have a criminal threshold, and the police should only get involved where that criminal threshold is met. If they're looking at non-criminal incidents, that should be extremely rare, and it should only happen where there is a real risk of imminent criminality. That's a very high threshold. So I was concerned, and I did take action, together with the then Home Secretary, which was to restrict the circumstances in which the police could record people's personal details for these so-called non-crime hate incidents.
That seems to have worked well. You know, a Telegraph journalist, Alison Pearson, getting a visit from the police on Remembrance Sunday in relation to one of these so-called NCHIs, non-crime hate incidents, not being told any of the detail of the alleged offence, not being told who the complainant was, and would she be so good as to come down to the police station to be questioned over this matter?
And I had intended to go further, but for the election. And what concerns me is that the new Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is apparently planning to undo those changes that I made a few months ago.
Well, shouldn't it have concerned you and the rest of your party when David Cameron himself introduced the fucking thing back in 2014? To be exact, how could your party even have introduced such a stupid and insulting and anti-freedom law in the first place?
Do you not accept her case, which is that recording non-crime hate incidents is in principle important if we are to chart the rise and fall of this kind of prejudice?
Oh, don't you start defending this stupid law, Mr Phillips. A non-crime is a non-fucking event.
Well, of course, things like, you know, anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred are recorded by all kinds of organisations. The police should only be recording this kind of information, which falls below the criminal threshold, if there is a real and imminent risk of criminality following. Because for a start, if someone gets a full criminal record check done, that will get disclosed. Now, some cases have been reported this week by The Times, for example, where 9-year-old children were getting their details recorded as non-crime hate incidents for things happening in playgrounds. A Telegraph journalist, a different Telegraph journalist, said they were investigated for making comments on the trans debate. Now, that is wrong. People should have the right to free speech, and the police should not be policing thought.
And the reason you and your Tory colleagues didn't realise that crucial point back in 2014 is... oh, never mind. Now, you and your host are about to discuss the very uplifting topic of assisted dying, so I'll leave you both to it. Lovely viewer, if you've enjoyed this video, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.